Welcome to the Let's Talk Growth podcast, where we focus on the topics that can help companies unlock their growth potential. Now here's your host, Bill Hupp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Growth. I'm your host, Bill Hupp, and today I'm joined by Mike Haldane, the founder and president of MarketWise Advising. Welcome back to the podcast, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
In today's episode, we're talking about how to manage the organizational change needed to succeed with as a service. So let's start here, Mike. Why is it necessary to change the organization to succeed with as a service, and what kind of change is necessary?
Well, at first blush, it looks like this change should be relatively straightforward. In my experience, however, it tends to be a little bit more complicated than everybody thinks at first. But again, not insurmountable. It's good to recognize that the way that we approach things is going to be different with as a service versus, a capital model, which, in many cases, we're talking about companies that have been doing the capital model for many years, decades, sometimes even more. And now it's a matter of, okay, we're selling everything as a service now. That's different. So it's different in a lot of ways. It's different from the standpoint of the offering itself. It's different in terms of how it happens from an accounting standpoint. It's different in terms of how we talk about it with customers. And then there's this support model that, may not have been there before that is different with as a service. So it really impacts all functional areas within the organization. It's just different. It's nuanced in a lot of ways. And so it's really a matter of making sure that everybody understands what those ways are, and then how to sort of tweak the operation to support the as a service offering.
Is this change difficult? And if so, why? And what are some things maybe that an organization can do to make the transition a little easier?
I won't say that it's difficult, but I will say that it does take a little bit of time. And it's not difficult because what we're talking about doing really isn't difficult. The difficult part is to take the time and put the effort into helping the organization understand what's different and why we're doing it and what their role in all of that is. And, to be quite honest, in my experience, and I've done this a number of times now, it takes about a year for the organization to completely transform to the point where they're hitting on all cylinders as it relates to the as a service offering. And in many cases, we're talking about organizations that are doing both what they have always done as well as an as a service offering. So, in most situations, the organization that is coming to market with an as a service offering has been selling capital products for many years. And now they're talking about also offering an as a service offering. It's not meant to replace anything that they're doing currently. It's just meant to augment that with another set of value proposition or value proposition benefits that they can then offer to the customer. And we've talked about a lot of those as the episodes have rolled out. But it's really just a matter of helping the organization understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and making sure that everybody understands their role in setting up the platform to be able to deliver things in a stellar way.
This may be a question with not an easy answer, but how long can it take? How long should it take?
Well, that's a good question. How long should it take? I would think that it should take a couple of quarters to really get the organization to the point where it needs to be to deliver this in a way that everybody envisions on the front end. The reality, however, is that change is sometimes hard, and certain organizations, based on culture and based on the makeup of the employee population, sometimes they change in a slower fashion, and that's okay, as long as we recognize on the front end what we think that might look like, and then put in place everything that's necessary to make that transformation a possibility. And that includes training and, strat work and all the things that we've talked about in the past. So I would say, to answer your question, I would say that in most organizations, it's going to take the better part of a year to fully transform to the point where you can do what you wanted to do on the front end.
Of the many considerations that need to be taken into account when managing change, what do you think are the most important?
Well, I think, a lot of this has to do with culture, and the credibility of the leadership team and the believability of the story. So there's definitely some work that needs to be put into that. But really, it comes down to whether or not those that are going to be required to make the changes are believing in the strategy. So, it always comes back to strategy. In this case, what we're talking about is we have a new offering. We're doing this for strategic reasons. This has become one of our strategic initiatives for the year or for the next several years. And everybody needs to understand what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the role in that is going to be. And, again, change is hard. So, it starts with an understanding, a completely transparent understanding of what we're doing and why. And, to that extent, you want to make sure that people understand that we're doing this so that we can grow. This is a value to our customers because they can purchase things that they haven't been able to purchase before due to budget constraints. Now there's a better way for them to get what they need and to get it sooner, which is good for us, both from the standpoint of this year's sales, but also from the standpoint of recurring revenue over the long term. So, if you explain that, hey, we're doing this because it makes sense for us, it makes sense for the customer, here's how we're going to go do it. So, the execution part of the strategy. And then, back to the football analogy, if we're going to run plays and we're going to score touchdowns, this is the position that everybody plays, and here is our game plan. So, again, that understanding of everybody's role and responsibility and how it all fits together, that's critical. And it's critical not just with as a service, but it's critical with any rollout of a strategic plan. Everybody really needs to thoroughly understand the strategy, their role, and why we're doing what we're doing. And if that understanding is there, you're going to find that from a cultural standpoint and a believability standpoint and an excitement standpoint, everybody's going to get on board and they're going to put forth their best effort, and we're going to wind up with the best result that we could possibly expect when all of those things are working. But without that, if you have certain people that are digging in and not doing their part, it's usually because they don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, or they don't believe in it. And so, there's some extra care that needs to be taken in those situations so that those people can be counseled, and we can answer all the questions that they might have so that we can get them to the point where they thoroughly understand why we're doing this. And once that happens, they're usually your biggest champion. But sometimes, certain individuals require a little bit of extra care to get them to that point. And it's critically important that we not just ignore those situations, but address them head on so that we've got the entire team moving in a direction that's in line with where we're trying to go strategically.
You touched on strategy a little bit there, but how does managing the organizational change relate to strategy?
Well, it's, the change is, it has to be aligned with strategy. In any organization, there needs to be a strategy for how we're moving forward. If we look 3 to 5 years into the future, what are our key objectives? And what are the strategies that are going to help get us there? The strategy for next year, the strategy for the year after that. What are our strategic imperatives based on what we're trying to achieve from a 3 to 5 year objective standpoint? And then from there, what is our operating plan? And the operating plan is what defines what we need to get accomplished this year. And it's also what defines how we're going to go do that. So that's where everybody's role and responsibility and who's accountable for what, and what are our monthly milestones and all of that sort of thing get defined. And so again, I think from the standpoint of culture and understanding the strategy and understanding everybody's role, it's critically important that all of those things are in place if you expect flawless execution. And that's always the goal. Flawless execution is always what we want to achieve. We never get to the point of flawless because things come up that we didn't expect, but again, as close to that as possible, with the ability to solve the challenges as they come up with a good root cause analysis process so that we can quickly move through challenges and move on to the next thing and keep the strategy moving. All of that has to be in place for this to succeed, or for any initiative to succeed. And everybody has a role to play, so everybody's got to be on board, and if they're not, we have to take the steps to get them on board.
You talked about getting buy-in, right, from everybody on the team and everyone is understanding their various roles. How big a part in all this does organizational culture play?
It's pretty huge. I mean, if the organization is oriented toward putting the customer first and making that customer experience as good as it can possibly be, and if everything they do every day has, that perspective in mind, I think this makes a transition, like as a service, a lot easier, because in the end this is really good for the customer as well as being really good for the company making the offer. And so, a culture that is focused on the customer is going to have a big leg up, but also a culture that is focused on succeeding, right? You want a culture to be focused on, uh, both succeeding individually as well as succeeding as a company, and those should be one of the same. That the company should be set up such that if it succeeds, the employees succeed, and if that's well understood, and the strategy is well understood, and everybody believes that, hey, we're going to go do this as a service offering, it's going to be good for the company, and therefore it's going to be good for me, both financially and from a skill set standpoint. There should be a lot of energy that's generated from that. On the other hand, if you have a culture that is afraid of change, that's going to mean that it's going to take longer to get things to the point where you can execute flawlessly, or as close to that as possible. So, I think it's important to understand, and it's part of the growth readiness assessment. How is the culture today, and what changes need to be made to impact it in a positive way so that something like this can actually happen, and meet expectations. Most cultures that I found that are positive ones are ones that truly understand where the company is going. So they understand the mission and the vision, and they truly understand the strategy and what their role in that is. But where culture maybe isn't what you would want it to be, it's usually because people are a little bit in the dark about what the company is trying to achieve and what their role in all of that is. So a lot of this is education, and putting the things in place that keep people motivated to learn and to change and to evolve and to do well financially.
Well, it certainly seems like, this is part and parcel of setting up a successful as a service offering. So, Mike, thanks again for the insights. We appreciate the conversation as always, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Let's Talk Growth. If you enjoyed it, feel free to rate and review the podcast. You can get new episodes and listen to old ones by visiting marketwiseadvising.com/podcasts. Let's Talk Growth is owned, produced, and published by MarketWise Advising, LLC.